All right, welcome back. So in this video, like in the last video, I actually finished with jQuery, like the basics that I said. But you do need to know some advanced jQuery too, because things like adding effects, you haven't seen them till now. And one of the very good things of jQuery is its easy animation effects, right? You can add like things like fade and slide to a lot of elements, almost any element on the page, right? So that's why animations are really important too. And I'm going to show one more function that we could use if we want to later on. And that can be really helpful in a lot of cases because let me I'll give you an example that time. So these were the methods we had learned in the basic jQuery, right? CSS, text, HTML, all the class related methods and ATTR method. Now these are the things that you will need in the advanced jQuery, right? Which are first event listeners, of course. Second is a KeyPress, which is to do something when a key is pressed. Like here, currently I'm switching between two slides by pressing the left arrow or the right arrow. So of course there's some functionality added that when the left arrow is pressed, my screen goes to the previous slide, and when the right arrow is pressed, it goes to the next slide, right? So obviously there's something happening behind the scenes, and that would have been added through a KeyPress, all right? And the next is animations. Animations is, I think, the most interesting thing that you'll see because you've made things beautiful, but adding fade in effects, fade out effects can make things look much better, right? All right, so this is a standard jQuery document like always, but I'm going to start with the documentation this time, right? So in jQuery, you don't have to write the whole add event listener thing. You have a simple function named on. So what I can search for is .on, right? So .on is basically really similar to an add event listener. So let's say I have this and this is set up perfectly fine. Then what I can do is I refresh this, I check if I have jQuery, right? And just to make something more interactive, I'll add a button here. I mean, just because seeing an event with a button is initially more easy, of course. It says click me to do something. All right. So now let's just select our button. We can see that's not happening because we had not refreshed. And I'll add a BR tag here, not making div. Alright, so now this is on another line and I can select my button. Let's see if that is working. You can see that is, right? Alright, so now let's add an event listener to this button by doing button dot and then you write .on, meaning that on, basically add event listener is represented by a simple on, right? Then in here you have again two things. First is the event you're listening for, which is, let's say, the click. All right, and next you have your function, and this closes here and the on bracket closes here. All right, so now inside this function I can do anything just like I could do it with the event handlers, right? Because this actually is an event handler. Just in vanilla JS, what I could do, I can do in here. So I can do alert button pressed. Now if I click this, I get this button pressed, right? So now my jQuery is working fine. Great, excellent. So now this is what you could do, and this is not really difficult, really different. In here you could have any event. So let's say I add button dot double, and I'll refresh this first just to remove the alert on single click. So for the alert, this I can do button pressed twice. So now if I see I'm pressing once, does nothing happens. I press twice, I get an alert, right? So seems like the event listener is working perfectly fine, and you can do .on instead of just .add event listener. And you can have a lot of things here. Of course, this is a really long document, but this is what you basically needed to know, right? All right, like this is also little powerful because you can select the filter the descendants of the selected elements that will call the handler, right? So you could add like one handler for multiple things. You could read this if you want, right? I mean, I do recommend that you read this out first, not first, but in the end, right? But one thing about this is that, like, we all know click is really common, right? So you don't always have to write .on then click. What you can simply write is .click, right? Right. And with this, what you could basically do is, like, if we go in its docs, you see this just takes in a handler, meaning that I can do and then instead of writing .on click, I could simply write .click, and inside I could give a function, and of course I do need to have event in here. I mean, doesn't even matter in this small thing, but I could do alert pressed, and now if I press this, I get an alert pressed. So this became even easier. I had to write one more less. However, everybody recommends, and I recommend too, that you always use .on, right? And while you might think that that is for some weird reason, believe me, it is not. And I'll just tell you once. I'm not going to show you any example here because we haven't made a really interactive thing until yet. But imagine you had 3 LIs here, right? And you added a click listener to those LIs. That's great. But later, like, imagine having a to-do list, right? So you had 3 to-dos first, and they were initially present when the to-do list loaded, and hence they got the event listeners. But then, with the help of some input up here, you added another LI. But the thing is that if the listeners are already added using .click, then there is no way that you can add the same listener to the fourth LI because, without writing any specific set of code. Like this .click, if I select multiple items on this, right? Let's do that first, right? So let's see that once. So if I do li .click, and then I give a function with an argument of event, I need to press shift plus enter, and then in here I give alert and click li, right? So I have added a click listener to all these LIs, and if I click any of them, I get this, right? But what if I went in here, I had added some functionality. What if I had that you could add another LI in here by just, typing something in an input bar and pressing enter. So what I'm saying is that if you did something like that, then whichever new LI is added will not get this click listener, right? If you are using .click. If you are using .on, then with the syntax we have seen, it will not get that. But there is actually a way which you can use, and you can figure that out by yourself. You can try if you need ever, right? And if you are unable to, then let me know, right? Because we'll probably see that if we need that in an example, but that's no use in seeing right now because we don't have a functionality of adding something, right? And for that, I'll have to like make a input and take its value and a lot of things. All right. However, that's why you should use .on, because with that you can facilitate that even if a new LI is added, it does get this same click listener, and you do not have to write any extra code for that, right? So that's why you should use .on, and you could have .dbl click too. It's not that it works only for click, right? If I bring this and I do this DBL, make sure to spell that right. So now on single click nothing happens, but on double click I'm getting an alert, right? Alright, so this does work, right? So this is all for the event listeners. What you could do is inside the on, you could give any of your event handlers, right? And it would work fine. Alright, so the next is the KeyPress. So let me search that here and I'll show you that. KeyPress. So what KeyPress basically does is it actually just, does something if you press a key, right? So let's add that to a, let's say, the whole body. Right, and what I can do is and now if I press any key, I get an alert saying pressed key, right? So what you could do is let's see their example here. So they've added it only to a particular thing, right? But you could add that to, this is what's their target. Input ID of target. So they have an input here that is saying ID is target and they're selecting that, right? So this is actually a practical use and that's why I'm showing their example here, and because I'd have to add some code in here like this, right? So they had an input and on that input they added a key press function, right? Inside which you can give a callback which needs to be executed if any key is pressed, right? Alright, and this is basically how you do something for any key, right? If I press this right now, I can see the handler for .keypress has called this many times, and yeah, so this is just normal things, right? However, the one important thing in KeyPress is that you don't, like, if we are on this slide right now and I want to go to the previous slide, that works only if I press the back arrow, right, or the left arrow. This does not work if I press anything. Like I'm pressing G right now, but this does not work. That's because it works only if we press the left arrow. So how is that actually determined? So what we can do for that is we can make a key press, and obviously this is a function, so this will have an event, right? And inside this I can do, right? So now if I clear the console and I go to the body, I press something, right? So first the previous key press is executed, due to which I'm getting the alert, and then I get a really long event, of course, which contains all the data about the event, right? Then the one thing that you do need to know in here is this, right? This which, and this is actually a code for the key that you are pressing, right? So here you see I've pressed F, right? And now if I go back here and I press F again, and this is again, so you see again the which is 102, and I'm sorry, the which is 102 again here. So means F actually corresponds to 102, right? So what you could do is you could make something like, and I'll refresh the page. So we know that F now means 102. So what you can do is, let's say you make an event for key press, and you do if event dot which equal to 102. Then we can do alert F was pressed, and else we can do alert something else was pressed, right? So now I've added a key press to my whole body, basically that if I'm on the body and I'm clicking a key, I'm pressing a key, then I should get an alert of F was pressed if my F key is pressed, meaning my event.which is 102, and I should get something else if something else was pressed, right? Because 102 will always correspond to F and only 102 will correspond to F, right? And 102 can only have F. Like, it's a two-way unique relationship, right? So now if I press F, I say F was pressed. I mean, you can't see that I'm pressing F, but trust me, I'm pressing F, right? And if I press something else, it says something else was pressed. I'm pressing S, it shows me something else was pressed. And any key, this shows me something else was pressed. And one of the most important can be the enter key. So what you can do is, if it's 13, like enter has the code 13, right? So what you can do is alert enter key pressed, right? And now if I go to the body, I press something, it says something else was pressed. And like there are two event listeners here, so I'm getting two alerts. Like this first alert is basically due to this first event listener, which is giving me something else was pressed because I pressed enter, right? And then the next alert I'm getting is due to this enter key pressed, which is due to this key press event, right? So this is working fine. So what you can do now is whenever you need something, so you can just do some search like these are all the codes for the keys, right? I mean, this will be common for anything, so you can visit any site and you have the codes here for all the things, right? Great. And you could visit this one, keycode.info. I think this will have a better table. I mean, I did not like the previous syntax, right? So here you can press any key and you can get its, I mean, code and play around with it if you want to, right? So you could like get this key event.which value for each key and do that for something like that. So what they would have done here is they would have added a key press event that if I'm pressing the left key, so let's see what the left key corresponds to, 37, right? Arrow left corresponds to 37. So if my event.which is 37 on the body, then go to the previous slide. And if my event.which is, I guess this will be 39, alright. So if my event.which is 39, then go to the next slide. So this is how they would have done something like this, right? So KeyPress is, I think, an interesting and important thing that you could use in a lot of applications, right? Alright. So now the next thing that we have, which is the last thing that we can see in the jQuery, is the animations, right? And for the animations, they have a separate section here, you can see, because animations is pretty important part of jQuery, right? And so you can click on this effects, and in here you see they have like, I think this will be 15 effects if I count, I don't know, I mean, just a guess. So they do have a lot of effects, and what we can focus on inside of this, like this basics will just have that, okay, hide this or show this. That will be like simple dot hide dot show. You're not gonna see hide the matched elements, show the matched elements, toggle, right? So not very different. So what we can see is the fading, right? So we have fade in, fade out, fade to, and fade toggle, right? I mean, fade to would just fade that to a particular opacity, and the next three, I mean, they are evident from the name. This would fade something into the page, this would fade something out of the page, and this would fade something in if that is not already present, and this would fade something out if that is already present, right? So let's see an example. If I refresh this page and then I open my console again, so what I could do is I could like add an event listener to this button, saying like add an animation that whenever I press this button, this H1 should just go away. Or let's add something like, so this should go away, alright? Yeah. So what I can do is I can do button dot on click, right? And then what I can do is I can make a function here. This needs to be like this. I'll get my event, right? So now what I need to do is I select the H1 and I do dot fade in, and I can press enter. So now my button has an event listener that the H1 will be faded in whenever I press that, and obviously I first need to fade that out. So I change this to fade out, right? So if I press my button, my H1 should fade out, and it does actually fade out, and you saw that it got an effect, right? So let's try that again, right? And let's just make 2 buttons so that we don't have to refresh every time, and add an event listener again. And this will say click me to remove H1, and this will say click me to add H1, right? If I refresh, what is this brand? Oh, BR tag did not get added here, right? So now I have 2 buttons here, and so now I'll have to select them separately, right? Because I can't add the same event to both of them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this an ID of, let's say, first, and I can give this an ID of second. Great autocomplete, right? So now I go here and I can type hash. I need to refresh, right? So I can type hash first dot on click, and I can do a function having event, and what that function will do is it will just fade out the H1, right? So I select the H1, alright, and I can add a similar for fade in, but that will be on the second button, which has an ID of second, right? So these 2 buttons should work now. So if I press this, the H1 vanishes. If I press this, it comes on again, right? So yeah, we have the fade in and fade out working. And one last thing, you obviously don't need to have 2 buttons to do that. What you can simply do is you can make another button, and in here, I mean, this button could do the job of the above 2 in itself, and I'll say toggle H1, and the ID will be third, right? So now if I go in here and I just simply add this thing, and the function for that is fade toggle, and the ID will be third. So now if I press this, the H1 vanishes. I press this again, the H1 comes back, right? So you can see how fade toggle works, right? So if something is not present on the page, it will come, and if it's present, then it will go away, right? And one thing that I want to show you is that, of course, now if you are pressing this, it is taking a certain time to go on, or certain time to come back. So it's not necessary that you would always want the same time. You might want lesser time on something, or you might want longer time on something, right? So what you can do for that is, I'll refresh. You can give fave toggle, and inside here you can give a number, right? So by default that is 400, and that number will basically represent, let's say I type 1000. So what do you expect to happen now? When I press this, it goes out in a longer time, right? It takes exact 1 second, right, to come back or to go out, right? And why is that? Because the number you give in here, this is actually the value in milliseconds is converted to seconds, and that is the amount that this, the thing that you're selecting takes to fade in or fade out, right? So just to show you, of course, that will not be a really viable solution to anything, but I can do 10,000 here. And now when I press this button, this should fade out in 10 seconds. And we'll have to wait for that. But you see that it is actually fading out. And if I press, it will take 10 seconds to come back. So that's what you can do, the first thing, right, inside this fade thing. And this will be converted to milliseconds, and same is applicable for fade in and fade out too. Alright, great. And the next thing is that you can have a callback in here. Right, so a callback inside of callback here, so that will say right, and I don't want both of these fades, that will be actually really irritating, so I'll refresh and add this fade again. So now if I refresh, it takes 10 seconds to go out, and then we get our alert, right? And this is the basic use of the callback inside this fade, right? What happens is that, as we have here, like of course you will not have 10 seconds, but your fading can actually take a good amount of time, right? Depending on what your use is. But even 400 milliseconds, which is the default, 400 milliseconds is the default, by the way. So even that is a really large time for, a program. So what if you want to do something after the code has completed, this fading has completed? Then you give this single thing right here, right? So this would be useful that, when this is actually faded out, let's see if that's present. It's actually still present in the body. It's just that the display is set to none. So what if you wanted to just remove something off the page? So you'd have to give a separate function for removal, and that you would give inside the callback, right? So this was just an example. But basically what you need to know is that you can give any code inside the callback to a fade, and this works for fade in and fade out too, of course. And that code will be executed only after this fading has been completed, right? Alright, so that was all about fading, right? And there's a similar thing for slide too, and you can check that out. Here, sliding, right? So there's slide down, slide toggle, slide up, right? And it's really similar to fade, right? And not a great amount of difference. And that way we have finished the animations too. So we have finished jQuery, and I know I finished that really quick. Again, I'm saying that, but I've discussed the reasons in the last video too, and it didn't actually need a lot of time. If you are not comfortable in jQuery, then you will become comfortable as we do some exercises and all. And I'll try to use jQuery in a lot of things, and you can try to use jQuery by yourself too. Like, think of something, try to make that, and do something innovative as an exercise. And if you run into a problem, let me know. I'll actually be happy to help you, right? Alright, so that's it about jQuery. That's it for the whole front end. Congratulations, and we can start with the back end now, right? Great, excellent. So that's it for this video. I'll see you in the next one.